Welcome back to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Washington, and we're talking about Dick Cheney with Larry Wilkerson, who was Colin Powell's chief of staff and now teaches national security policy in Washington. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So let's move ahead in Cheney's career. We get 2004, George Bush is reelected. The Iraq War is spinning more or less out of control in 04, 05. Rumsfeld gets fired. What happens to Cheney?
It'd be difficult for me at this point to prove this in a historical sense, and I'm still researching, and I'm sure others are too, and as archives are open and as papers come out and as mementos, not mementos, but memoirs are written and so forth, perhaps there'll be more evidence as we discover emails that were lost. But I think the president begins to understand in late 2005 how ill-served he's been on several key issues, Iraq being one of them, if not the most prominent one. And who's at the center of that ill service? The vice president. I don't think it was a moment of epiphany for the president. I think it was a gradual thing. And I think he probably was in a position of incredulity and also a position of indecisiveness, that is to say, which is unlike him. What do I do now? I mean, I've really got a problem here. After all, he had people like Brent Scowcroft, his father's national security advisor, very close to his father. I'm convinced carrying a message from his father to him. He had others doing the same thing. He'd had the out call with Colin Powell on 13 January, where Powell had essentially read him the riot act, had told him he had card-carrying members of the Likud party serving in the Pentagon, had told him that the tension between the SecDef and the SecState and their two entities was just palpable and was ruinous, to which Bush responded, "Oh, come on, you've come from the Cap Weinberger, George Shultz days. It can't be any worse than that." And Powell fixed him and said, "It is orders of magnitude worse than that, Mr. President." And so he'd had this out call with his number one cabinet officer for 4 years, Colin Powell, who had essentially told him his administration was a wreck, that he had no national security decision-making process worth a damn. So there were a number of things, and as you pointed out, the Iraq situation was looking pretty grim. Even a president who was fed oatmeal every morning and given, you know, the yes man type answer that he was looking for by everyone from DCI Tenet to Condi Rice at Foggy Bottom, he had to be getting some of this.
Well, he must have been hearing, because we're certainly reading it in the press from serious people, that this was the most significant strategic defeat in the history of the United States, probably.
I'm told, though, that he did not read at all, that occasionally he would read this or that book, as he often testified to. He would read this or that magazine, but that he really did not read very much at all. And the American people are sometimes, they stun me when I talk across the country and I get questions and everything, how much they think our president knows. The president knows what people tell him. The president knows what the principal people around him tell him. And if those people are in lockstep with someone, that is to say their allegiance is more to the vice president than it is to others, or if they see the bread is buttered on the vice president's side and not the president's side, then the message getting to the president is going to be skewed. So it's very difficult for the president. That's the reason
and this was a group around him that had a clear-cut agenda. They had
clear-cut agenda, and
a document in '99 called Project for New American Century, which laid out exactly what they wanted to do.
And frankly, nice people, some of them, but not all that competent. Andy Card, chief of staff, for example. I don't think Andy Card could lead a hungry mule to a barbecue. There were others. And Dick Cheney had arrayed around him people who were absolutely superb. They were bureaucratic entrepreneurs. They were bureaucratic masters. Scooter Libby was one. David Addington was another. John Hanna was another. He had people placed on the NSC staff itself who were that way, like Robert Joseph.
But this starts to change.
This starts to change, I think, because the president begins to distance himself a bit. I think we saw it come to its ultimate conclusion in a rather insignificant matter, but nonetheless significant for Cheney. I'm told Cheney was furious when he found out and went back to the president to get him to revisit it, but the president wouldn't. That was the ultimate pardoning of Scooter Libby. The vice president did not win on that one. And I think the president did that because the president realized that he had been lied to. and that he had been lied to, even potentially by the Vice President of the United States. And that probably didn't set too well with George
Lied to
W.
over the whole
Bush.
Palm affair.
Yeah, yeah.
Bush presidency ends, Cheney leaves, and it ain't very long before he's all over television. He's on Fox practically as a regular commentator. He's positioning himself as a player in today's politics. Talk about Cheney and what he represents within the Republican Party.
He represents a group that I think is taking the Republican Party like a group of lemmings over the cliff. You can say, as one congressman did who served with him for a long time, asked me out to lunch himself one day, and I'd never met him before. He was from a state that I don't have much knowledge of, so I couldn't figure out why he was asking me to lunch. He wanted to talk to me about Dick Cheney. He wanted to tell me that Dick Cheney had always been what I thought Dick Cheney was as vice president. It was just that he had been kept from exhibiting it completely. And he based this on his experience with him in the Congress for several years when he was serving with him. And I said to this congressman, I said, well, why are you telling me this? And he said, because I'm trying to convince you that Dick Cheney's a dangerous person. And I think that's true about this particular segment of my party. My father used to put it this way. My father was a lifelong Republican. My father would say, you know, you need to be more leery of the far right than the far left. The far left will bankrupt you. You can recover. The far right will kill you. And that's what I'm talking about. There is this strand in my party. There is this strand that finds its home in my party right now that it'll kill you.
Who else who do you put in that group?
Well, as the extreme end of that group, I put people like Sarah Palin. I watched the animosity that she generated with John McCain. I think John McCain was even appalled by it on several occasions when I was watching campaign rallies. I watched the animosity in the periphery, the almost blatant racism, the things that she was playing to, much the way George Wallace used to play to them, much the way the early Strom Thurmond used to play to them, much the way, for example, people today play to them when they're just straightforward about their situation and their beliefs. I'm not confident this is the case, but I think it is, that part of this is what caused Colin Powell to come out and endorse President Obama, because he saw what was happening in the periphery of those campaign rallies, and he saw the fearful prospect of another Martin Luther King Jr., of another Bobby Kennedy, of another John Kennedy. He saw the prospect of another president going down under the right-wing fears, hatreds, phobias of America. Sociologists will tell you that in any society like ours, there was probably somewhere between 6 and 11% of people who were maladjusted. You could say people who are nuts. Do the numbers there. 304 million people, 7%, that's a lot of nuts. And it's unfortunate that many of those people are being attracted to because of the virulent rhetoric of, because of the racism, inherent racism of, because of the hatred of this group of right-wingers, who many of whom identify with the Republican Party. It's arguable that that's part of that craziness. That's part of America's heritage.
You've got this kind of unholy alliance, in a way, of these hardcore corporate commercial interests,
oh, yes,
represented by Cheney. And if you look at the Tea Party, who, you know, a piece of it is anti-corporate. Like if you talk at you talk to
how did they get together?
Yeah, you talk to ordinary Tea Party people. Why do you trust big corporate America more than government? They say, oh, we don't.
Yeah.
You know, it's all the same kind of thing. But there's this weird alliance that they've been able to create with the Cheney-esque forces and this populism.
Well, they take the hot button issues. They take the hot button issues that resonate with all these groups. Abortion, for example. Homosexuals, for example. I'm waiting for the Don't Ask, Don't Tell group to come up now that we've gone public, I think, this morning. The Obama administration has said that it's moving swiftly to do away with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. we'll see if that has the kind of resonance with people like Palin and others that perhaps Cheney's, of course, caught hoist on his own petard there. He has a lesbian daughter. And frankly, I think that's what it's all about with Cheney. If Cheney did not have that family situation, Cheney would be as homophobic as anyone else in that group. So you've got politicians who are smart enough to say that, and that resonates with all these nuts. And so let's grab onto that, and that. And you very seldom get an opportunity to come into a complex discussion of issues to where you identify what you just identified. Hey, do you really think big pharmacy ought to be running the country? Do you really think we should have shifted so much wealth from you, the American taxpayer, to these banks? $700 billion by Bush and Paulson, and then another $750, $800 billion by Geithner, Summers, and Obama. Do you really think we should have done that? That's historic. That's the greatest shift of wealth from the middle class to these 1% financial investment banks and insurance companies in history. You think we should have done that? Oh, no, we shouldn't have done that, they'll say. Well, you're allied with the people who helped that happen. They don't understand. It's too complex.
Thanks for joining us.
Surely.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.